Congratulations to the Winnipeg Jets. It's a baby trade request. Here we go.
You're Locked On Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Wow. Yep, it happened. The Hellebuyck trade request is public, and both the Jets and Hellebuyck have made their statements. The battle lines have been drawn. I warned you it could get to this, and here we are. It's just a couple weeks before camp. The timeline is now a few weeks, and Hellebuyck has decided to do the nuclear option, which I get it. I see this from all sides. And, I don't disagree with his assessment, but boy, oh boy, does this really suck heading into a pivotal season. It sucks in the sense that it's going to be a real problem and a distraction for the Jets. But on the other side, this could be exactly what this team desperately needed to kickstart the future of the team. The Jets have tried to coast for many years, and they've gotten away with a lot of it. But this time, something had to give. And this time the players took ownership of it. Hellebuyck asking for the trade. Apparently he did it privately a few months ago, which we said happened. A lot of folks said there was no way and that he hadn't requested the trade. Well, surprise, it did. All the signs were there. You just had to pay a little bit of attention. Now he is pushing all the chips in and trying to make this move happen before camp starts. So it's all out there now. I want to talk through the implications of this and whether or not the Jets played this right or if they have screwed up and why there's a sound argument for both parties. But first, let's talk about the trade request itself. Hellebuyck came out earlier this afternoon, of course, after I'd already had yesterday's episode uploaded. Not a problem because I would have wanted some time to think through this. I have a lot of complicated feelings with what Hellebuyck is asking for here. In many ways, Hellebuyck has been one of my favorite players. I've got a couple of his jerseys. I've loved watching him. He has a chance to be maybe one of the most talented, if not the most talented Jet that I watch in my lifetime. I look at the kind of player that he is, a multi-Vezina winner, a Hart Trophy winner. When are we going to have another MVP caliber player, right? That is an extraordinary honor. It is extremely rare. And, some teams get blessed with having guys like McDavid where they can just get it every year. We had a goalie who got it, and goalies just don't ever win this award. It's extraordinarily rare to see a goalie win the Hart, and Winnipeg had one. That is the level of player that he was. Now we're kind of in a situation where he has felt the Jets' direction is backsliding, and he sees the future as limited, right? He's looking at his age, 33. He's looking at the time on his contract left, 4 or 5 years. Here you are in the latter stages of your chance to win a cup. He just won Olympic gold, and now he thinks he can't win in Winnipeg. And, I wish I could disagree with him. I really, really do. I'd love to say that he's at fault, that he's wrong, but his assessment's right. The Jets have run out their competitive window. They were doing it the last few years when they had that trade deadline in the President's Trophy year where they had Shen and Tanev. That was the door slamming shut. And I would suspect that might have been one of the final straws that broke the camel's back. Last year, obviously, it was a bit of a rough situation. I think the summer was probably not what Hellebuyck was looking for when they signed Taves and all those guys. And the year that followed really didn't change his mind. So here we are. He's put his request out there. He reveals he put it in a few months ago, which again, we said we knew, not a surprise. Now he is asking the Jets to move the process along. Winnipeg, for their part, has said we acknowledge the request, and that's about it. No comment. So begins the standoff. Dear Lord. This is exactly what I was worried about, right? Once the trade with Buffalo fell through in, the draft, you ran into a situation where the Jets were going to try and keep their asking price high, and the conversations would probably trickle throughout the summer, but they were going to sit on this and just pray and hope that whatever they did over the summer would be enough to convince Helly, that the time would sort of work out, and that they could come into camp and all hold hands together and dance around in a circle. Well, It doesn't work like that. Hellebuyck never changed his mind. He has always been consistently wanting to leave. That has been clear. He has not wavered in his assessment of where this team is going. And what this summer has shown is that the Jets aren't willing to do the stuff that's needed to actually make this team a win-now squad. They might think it is a win-now team as constructed, but anyone who has actually watched this team knows it's not. Their best chance was a few seasons ago, and that team really got rewarded with depth players who made the team worse. That's the best the Jets front office could conjure and negotiate. You could argue that, yeah, they did get played a bit with the whole Nelson thing, but that's just the reality. You are judged for what you're able to accomplish, and the Jets front office did not deliver. Why would Helly be fooled again this time? He signed that extension thinking this team would be seriously committed, feeling like they would be all in, and the all in that the Jets have done, their best returns were like Toffoli and Monahan, who, yeah, they were fun during the regular season. They contributed some nice goals, but for the most part, once the playoffs showed up, they were just too dang slow, and those were the better additions the Jets made. Winnipeg really didn't do much after that, and then you look at this summer, and you get Mario Ferraro, who I like for the third pairing. I think it's a really nice signing. I don't mind how the Jets have played this summer. I think it's much better for the long-term health of the franchise, but if you're a player who wants to win now, there is nothing that the Jets have done that makes you remotely feel this team is competitive. And if anyone says the whole President's Trophy thing again, I'm going to lose my freaking mind. We have talked about this so many times. The President's Trophy is a great regular season award. It does not mean that you are the best team suited for the playoffs. You might have the top seed, but guess what? You still might not actually be braced for what happens when the competition is no longer 31 other teams. You face 15 others that are going to be among the elites of the elites. Guess what? That matchup changes a lot when you're in a 7-game series and your coaching staff is getting outwitted by the opponents who's got even more faster and skilled weapons to work with than the Jets do. That's the reality of what you're up against. And Winnipeg has unfortunately fallen short of that barrier time and time again. Hellebuyck, for his part, deserves some blame too. There are series where his rebound control and the screen shots issues that he's had were really problematic. I mean, he wasn't good on those, but those were also weaknesses that have been hallmarks of his game. People knew that. They have tried to, adjust and stuff, but the Jets really struggled to actually counter those, right? They didn't block properly. They didn't shut down some of those angles. And you could argue that it's a lot of shared blame here. But there were also times where Hellebuyck was very good during the playoffs. He swept the Oilers several years ago almost by himself. He has dragged this team to the postseason in more years than they probably deserve. So he's given this franchise about as much as a single goalie can. But ultimately, the team in front of him, once that 17-18 squad passed, it just hasn't been good enough to get the job done. And here we are with the trade request. It is what it is. It really sucks, but I think ultimately this probably had to happen for the future of the Jets. Winnipeg has tried to kick the can down the road so many times, and this time they're not going to be able to do it. They might try and delay the trade for as long as possible, but there's only so much that you can put off the inevitable. And with Hellebuyck's trade request now out there in public, there will probably be more in the coming seasons. So I want to tell you this really nicely. Brace yourselves, because this year and what's coming could get a little bit turbulent, but I promise you, what lies at the end of all this drama may be exactly what the Winnipeg Jets have been looking for and not even realizing they were missing. We'll talk about why coming right up. Running a business shouldn't feel like you're trying to connect a bunch of systems that weren't designed to work together. One app for accounting, one for inventory, another for sales, and somehow none of them work together. Odoo is here to help. It's an all-in-one business management software that brings every part of your business together in one powerful platform. From sales and accounting to inventory and marketing, everything works together. Odoo is one platform to manage, grow, and scale your business. The best organizations know that success isn't just about talent. It's about having everyone working towards the same goal. And that's also true in sports. The Jets, off the ice have really made a concerted effort to add more community nights, better promo giveaways. I feel like their social media team has been out there a lot more and doing some good stuff. That is all the result of operations changes. And if you want to be just like the Jets making really positive changes, know that you should go with Odoo. Odoo is one platform to manage, grow, and scale your business. Try for free today at odoo.com/lockedon. That's odoo.com/lockedon. Great organizations win because operations matter. And that's why you should go with Odoo. Hey, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and now the #1 sports podcast network. Obviously, we are sorting through the ashes of a public trade request now. I think, practically speaking, some stuff has changed, right? Clearly, there is now public pressure for this Hellebuyck trade to happen. I can't promise when it's going to happen now because at this point, it's a little murky as to what the return would even look like and where all of this goes. But putting the trade itself aside, I want to tell you, like in a very happy way, to kind of brace yourselves for a lot to change over the next couple of seasons. This was really the biggest domino for Winnipeg to kind of have fall so that the team could move towards the eventual future it needs to reach. Winnipeg has lived off of this core probably a lot longer than it ever should have expected to. This group had many playoff appearances. Not a lot of playoff success, but, that's a separate story. Just getting to the postseason, they did it a lot. They've had a lot of regular season success. They have been, towards the top of the Central. They've won the President's Trophy. So it's not like they've accomplished nothing, right? And I think it would be a complete disservice to say that. But this team has also very clearly hit a ceiling, right? Once you get to a certain point with the squad, you have seen where the playoff vulnerabilities are. I've always said this, there's only one way to truly raise the ceiling of a team, and that is with top, young, elite talent. You can do it one of two ways. You can make blockbuster trades, or you can draft high. And the Jets have really done neither until this past year. You look at the kinds of trades the Jets are starting to make. The Logan Stanley return I thought was great. The Rucker for Yeager, I wouldn't exactly call a blockbuster, but they got a pretty solid return. Yeager looks like an NHLer, same does Rucker, but Yeager plays a position that might mean a little more for the Jets. But here we're walking into like a really big deal, similar to like the Dubois thing. You got a guy who wants out. You are probably going to get more parts than one top-end player. The return could be pretty solid, but at this point, I'm not even focused so much on the return. Hellebuyck leaving is going to be route one to top draft picks. I don't know that what the Jets are likely to get in this new trade is going to really move the needle competitively right now. Winnipeg might have to kind of swallow the pride and take a package that has a little more futures in it. The Jets have not wanted to do this the entire time, but they may not have a choice, especially if it gets to a point where Hellebuyck refuses to report. That trade request that he put out kind of tells you he is starting to run out of patience. He played his part of the process being quiet and trying to play along. The Jets took several months. A deal has not materialized. He's starting to flex his muscle in this engagement. So, I understand, right? I get it. But I think all of this was always going to happen for the Jets to move on, right? This core has been held together, trying to make things work. They've had, locker room cleanouts with leadership changes, captaincies stripped. You've had new leadership appointed, but there have been some issues that have never changed. How Scheifele kind of gets to dictate the top line has been a problem. Winnipeg lacking elite talent up front past the top line has been a problem. It's just been, again, kicking the can down the road. And now that Hellebuyck's trade request is out there, and now that it's clear this whole situation is going to escalate, it is time for the Jets to start really, and I mean really, thinking about the future. How they've played this summer sets them up a lot better for that future than had they, tried to bring in a bunch of players, a bunch of stuff, make a bunch of desperation deals. All of that would have screwed them over, and I think it would have put the team back even further. But with Hellebuyck gone, we're now down to Stuart Skinner plus whoever is going to be the backup, whether it's one of the young guys or, if the Jets were to go to Buffalo and get Lukin in or something, maybe he'll be the number 2 starter. I don't really care, right? None of them are going to be as good as Hellebuyck, and that's going to have a tangible impact on your regular season record. Skinner might be decent, right? He might be, above league average, but I think that would be asking a lot. And this Jets team, honestly, if the team is getting older and slower and they don't really rely too much on the youth, and instead go back to the veteran group that we've seen them do time before, I think we could see a rough season. But this is the pathway to start when you need to start picking in the top 5 or top 10 of the draft more frequently. Winnipeg hasn't had very many of those. Bjork is super exciting because he's one of those rare picks that's in that range. He's honestly lottery quality in my mind. I think he's going to be a future stud, and whoever hates on him in the comments, you shove it. Honestly, just shove it. He's awesome. I'm not too worried about him. I'm joking about the shove it thing, but I will say, he will tell you himself he's not afraid, and he's always been fearless. He's already playing against men who try to bully him, and he gets the better of them every time. So I'm not too worried about his size. The Jets have plenty of beef on this team already. They're not going to let him be bullied, but he's a little pit bull. He's kind of like Marchand in that I think he's just going to be a real pain in the butt for a lot of opponents. He is just one man, though, and the team, frankly, just needs more talent. This is where, the R word that nobody wants to talk about starts coming in. And as Hellebuyck's trade starts to materialize, because it will, it's now just a question of the timing, but it will happen. Who else might start to think about their future? You wonder about Morrissey, who's got a couple years left. Sandberg has, a year or two left. Connor just signed a massive extension, but, he said he's here if the team is winning. He hasn't said that he's going to be here through thick and thin with everything. So he might not be that locked in. Maybe we see a trade request from him. Eventually, Scheifele, once he's accomplished all of Ducky's records and stuff, he might think about his own future too. The old guard is starting to move towards the door. And it started with Hellebuyck. It's going to end with probably a lot of the veterans that we've all come to know and love. I think not all of them may end up moving immediately, and some of them may take some time, and some of them may even stick around for a lot longer than we thought. But I think this is the start of the exodus over the next few years. And, it is scary, right? You really don't know what's going to happen with this team going forward. This franchise constantly tells us that they are sensitive to gate revenue and, they're worried about the financials. But this is kind of the path that they chose for themselves. It was always going to come to an end. All good things must wrap up eventually. Now you are going to have to navigate what a rebuild looks like, and it is going to be one that's not intentional. It is forced. Players are going to start forcing Winnipeg's hand. They can't let guys walk for nothing. They can't allow this to be a depreciating asset where they get no return. It just is what it is, right? And, I'm not too stressed about it right now. It's going to be a longer-term process, but I think it's really important that the Jets take this next year or two to start really planning and preparing for the future. This team cannot allow itself to believe it is a competitor. It is not, and it will not be, especially once Hellebuyck goes. I think the return is going to be modest. I think it'll be okay. I don't think the Jets are going to look like they're winning the trade, and I don't even care that they do at this point. As long as they get a solid return that works for what the team needs going forward, that's fine, right? It is suboptimal. It's not great. There's an argument out there that the Jets overplayed their hand. I'll talk about how much I believe that and subscribe to that vision. I'll talk about whether it was right to wait or if the Jets screwed up. But at the end of the day, right, you can only work with what you've got ahead of you right now. And right now, the Jets seriously need to figure out this Hellebuyck trade as soon as possible. They have to figure out where he's going, whether it's Buffalo or another suitor. They need to do this before camp starts. I don't think you want to have a situation where he doesn't report and it starts to become a real weight on the rest of the team. All of the guys are already dealing with a lot of the pressure, and I'm sure the public trade announcement has gone off like a bomb in the room. I'm sure they were, to some degree, expecting it. I would guess the Jets front office probably expected it too. I'm sure Helly has not exactly been quiet about being pissed off at the direction of things, but now it is all finally coming to light, and we just have to accept the consequences that come with it. But at the end of all this, I think the pathway towards that top talent that the Jets have been dying for years is there. I do see it. And I think that is what I am excited about for the longer term. This core accomplished a lot, but it couldn't break that playoff ceiling that so many teams have struggled with. And, the Jets being in such a small market, they had some unique additional challenges. Factoring all of that in, it is now time to smarten up and think about those top picks that can get you to the promised land in the future. If you draft well and if you play your cards right with all of this, you might not have to have that super long rebuild that has plagued many a franchise. That turnaround might be faster than you expect, but it requires the Jets to be really committed and smart about how they approach and build value into this team. It's going to be difficult. It's going to require some tip-to-toe analysis, but they need to start doing it immediately because guess what? The future's coming and it's just about here. It is time for the Jets to really smarten up and get ready for whatever comes next. Amidst all that, though, I've seen a lot of things and comments about the Jets overplaying their hand. Did they really? Or did the Sabres kind of do the same and make their own mistakes? We'll talk about that coming right up. Support for today's episode comes from Indeed Sponsored Jobs. When workplace chaos hits and you need the right hire, Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps connect employers with candidates who match specific specific needs like skills, certifications, and location. So less time gets spent searching and more time gets spent finding the right fit. People know that finding quality hires can be difficult, and that's why they're all turning to Indeed. In the minute that I've been talking to you, companies like yours have made 27 hires on Indeed worldwide. I've personally used it when I was looking for work several years ago. I can attest to how great the resume builder is, and once I completed it and submitted, it was almost instantaneously matching me to jobs that fit my salary requirements, my location, my preferred work experience, and my history. It was so convenient, and I can only imagine that for companies like yours, it's easier than ever. So spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who tick off all your boxes. Listeners of this show will even get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnWinnipegJets. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnWinnipegJets right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/LockedOnWinnipegJets. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and now the #1 sports podcast network. Thank you for rejoining us on this rather chaotic evening. I was not really expecting the Jets to have to deal with the Hellebuyck trade request today. I thought it could come at some point in the next few weeks. Some of the media had been speculating that things were heating up towards camp, and well, Hellebuyck just threw it out there. So yeah, awesome, right? There's been a lot of talk about whether the Jets overplayed their hand, though, right? The trade that fell through on the draft floor with Buffalo, did the Jets royally screw this up? And on the one hand, I have an argument that says no, because the Jets still got their guy at the 8th overall pick. And the other side of this is, let's say that the trade package was something like Quinn, Murtaka, that 104 pick or whatever that the Sabres had, and Luukkonen or something along those lines. And the Jets were offering, Helly and 108, or that's what the Sabres were asking for. That swap isn't actually that good. You think about it, the 4th overall for 8th overall, plus Helly for that other middling package. It's just not that exciting. The swap doesn't quite equate to that, right? It'd be 104 for Helly and 108 for some of that other junk. And I just don't think it would have been that surprising or impressive of a return. And then you kind of look at the Sabres panicking a little bit and then taking Dax and Rudolph at 4th overall. And it's doesn't seem like they really got the guy that I think they were expecting to when they made this whole trade happen. I think that they were expecting 108. I think Dax and Rudolph at 8th overall would have made some more sense. But here they found themselves having to select him earlier and probably higher than they anticipated. So for the Jets and Sabres, I would say this deal not materializing, it's not great for either party, right? Winnipeg still got their guy, but now they have a very discontented goalie who has made his disgruntlement quite public. You could argue that, yes, teams knew he wanted out before, and that's true. But him threatening with this trade request is, subtly implying he's ready to hold out to make this deal happen. That will change the timeline, and that will also change the return. It's only going to hurt it, right? I don't know by how much, but it will hurt the return, and it'll make teams feel that they have more leverage negotiating with the Jets. So on this side of things, you could argue Winnipeg definitely overplayed their hand. You could say that the Jets backed themselves into a corner, and now they have to rely on the generosity of their opponents to bail them out. For my own part, I think my frustration is that it ever got to this point, right? The Jets had opportunities to make this deal. I think the Jets set the price too high. They wanted too much that was in the present. They wanted players who could help the team be competitive right now. That was a mistake. I think that has always been the mistake. If you could squeeze out a McLeod or something, cool. But the focus should have been more on the future, and the Jets are still looking in the present. Now they're going to have to figure out if they can even look at the present, because I don't know that what they're getting for the immediate here and now is really going to be that impressive. Jack Quinn, for me, does not really move the needle. If it were to go to, say, the Canes with a deal, Nikishin's probably part of the return, and I will tell you this right now, I already have enough trouble watching Neil Pionk when he's not with Dylan Sandberg. I do not want to watch Russian Neil Pionk on this team. I cannot do it. So, the returns are not looking superb if the Jets are still trying to get roster bodies. And that's what they're asking for. Another top 6 center, another roster player, probably a winger, all that stuff. I'm like, you have to be realistic about this. You have backed yourself up against the wall. You have allowed your goalie to wait for several months. The trade didn't happen. Now he's ready to flex his rights to hold out and not report. And, everyone can say he can sit out, and, the Jets have the leverage here, but they kind of don't. Once this year passes and it gets to next summer where his 10-team trade list kicks in, your whole field of opportunity just vanished to 10 teams. And he probably won't even accept a trade to all of those teams. So it's just, I don't know, man, it's a mess, right? And I think this is where the ownership of this team needs to take a hard look in the mirror and realize what has happened with the leadership and the progression of the vision of this team. The Jets are kind of like a smaller market Dallas Cowboys, but they don't even have the glitz and glamour and money of that sort of situation. They've got a much smaller market. They've got a complicated geographical placement amongst other NHL teams. They have trouble attracting free agent and traded talent. So you have to be really smart about how you play this. And I think the Jets kind of let their pride and feelings get a little bit in the way here. And unfortunately, that might really bite them in the coming weeks. I hope it doesn't, and I hope that what Chevy has traditionally done is, pulled a Houdini act with a good return at the last possible second. I hope that's what we see. But I think this situation, and now that it's very public and the request is in, it can only be challenging from here. Hellebuyck is an asset that is kind of hard to move, and especially one that is hard to get the kind of value that he truly deserves. He is probably still going to be a franchise level goalie on his next team. I don't think the age thing is going to be as big of an issue, but this past year didn't really help his case, and he is 33. Teams are going to see that with the additional 4 to 5 years of control and not really love that. So yeah, brace yourselves. Like I said earlier, buckle up. I think the ride is just beginning, but now it's speeding up, and I don't know where it's going at this point. I don't know if this is going to be the thing that starts the avalanche of moves, but I do think that a lot of change is coming to the Winnipeg Jets, and I do think it's change this team needs. But curious to know your thoughts on all of this. Let me know in the YouTube comments below or at my social medias at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Be respectful if you can. Disagree happily with me or the other fans. This is going to be a sensitive time for a lot of people, and I'm sure there's a lot of hurt feelings heading into this trade. But for tonight's episode, that's all the time that we have. Thanks for listening. We'll see you here tomorrow. Have a great night, and go Jets go.